What is going on, y'all? It is the Caveman back at it again with another video. And yes, the question that I'm posing today is something you've probably never thought about before. It's something that's tough to wrap your head around. But I do truly think that the AFC conference that we are seeing in 2021 could quite possibly be one of the best conferences that we've ever seen in NFL history. The amount of talent is off the charts that has been assembled in this conference, but before we break it all down, you guys know the drill around here. Mott's applesauce, if you're ever hungry, thirsty, or whatever it might be. Mott's applesauce will satisfy whatever satisfy you need to satisfy you. The Caveman guarantee, I promise it will never fail you. Let's get into this breakdown. All right, so I understand that this is a super bold claim to make. Like, this is super bold. But I just can't help but acknowledge the amount of talent that we've been seeing in the AFC this year. I mean, the amount of good competitive teams in this conference right now, it's kind of off the charts. Like, this is ridiculous. The AFC, as of right now, is super competitive, and this might age poorly. This whole video might age absolutely horribly, but right now, just from what I'm witnessing, I think the talent level is super high, and we'll see how it turns out at the end of the year. That's why hot takes exist. That's why bold claims exist, and that's exactly what this is, but I'm just gonna make it, speak it into existence, and see how it ages. Before we evaluate 2021's AFC, we have to first go into the past and see what its competition's looking like. So you might be asking, how could you determine whether or not a conference was uber competitive? And let me tell you how. I set my own personal requirements, and a conference must have 10 plus teams that I determine to be good / competitive themselves. And then you might ask the question, how do you determine what teams in that conference were good or competitive? Well, I set my own requirements for that as well. So in order for a team to be determined good or competitive in a given conference, I set two requirements. One being you must be an 8+ win team with a positive point differential, or you must be a 9+ win team. So a conference must contain 10+ teams that meet those requirements that I just set on screen in order to be determined uber competitive. Yes, it might be a little confusing, but you'll get the gist. Those are my standards. You can determine standards a little bit differently according to how you might want to set them, but those are my standards. It's my video. You're gonna freaking roll with it. So now we actually have to go and evaluate the past. We have to see what conferences in the past meet this criteria. Mind you, this evaluation only went back to 2002, so you could say I cheated a little bit, but that's when the divisions and the conferences were aligned the way that they are today. Before that, there were only 3 divisions per conference, and there were 5 teams in each. There were one division had 4 teams. It was just a complete cluster. I didn't want to go back that far to like the 1980s, 1990s. So 2002 is where I'm starting the evaluation, because that's when the conferences were set to how they are today. So what conferences in 2002 meet the criteria that I set previously? Well, let's check it out. Well, there were actually only 6 different conferences over the last 20 years or so since 2002 that met the criteria that I set earlier in the video. First, the 2002 AFC, the 2004 AFC, the 2006 AFC, the 2008 NFC, the 2014 AFC, and the 2016 AFC. It's actually kind of funny to see how good the AFC has been over the last few years. The NFC is always decent as well, but it seems like the AFC is always the most competitive. The 6 conferences that you're seeing right on screen here all had 10 or more teams that were determined good or competitive. But only one of those 6 surpassed 10 competitive teams. One year specifically had a conference that had 11 teams that I determined to be good or competitive, and that was the 2014 NFC with 11 very solid teams. Every team in the AFC this season put up a fight. They all stood a chance. They all fought their heart out to get a playoff spot. Like, this was the most competitive conference that I found. There were 10 total teams that had 9 or more wins in the 2014 AFC, and there was one team that had 8 wins with a positive point differential. Let's take a look at it. The AFC East, which wasn't even close to the most competitive, had 3 solid teams. The Buffalo Bills and the Miami Dolphins fought out for second place as the New England Patriots took first place, of course. The AFC North was just absolutely bonkers, with 3 out of the 4 teams surpassing 10 wins. I mean, holy shit. That's insane. And if you want to take it a step further, the Browns in the AFC North this year were also competitive. The fact that they had 7 wins in a division where the other 3 teams had 10 or more wins, I mean, that's ridiculous, right? The Browns were even standing a chance in this division, so you could say all 4 teams were solid here. The South, which is probably the least competitive out of the bunch, had the Colts and the Texans relatively dominating this one here. And of course, the AFC West, which always seems to be competitive nowadays. Besides for the Oakland Raiders, all 3 of those other teams are very solid. So, you know, this conference, it was ridiculously talented. Like, every team seemed to have a chance of some capacity. Every minute, every point, every play mattered this season. I mean, if you made one wrong play, if you made one wrong move, improve, you didn't get in the end zone on a play, I mean, that could have costed you your season. That win that you missed out on, that could cost you a playoff spot. I mean, this was as competitive as it got. It was ridiculously heartbreaking for any team that fought to 9-7 that year. All of those teams fought extremely hard in that difficult division to get to 9-7. The Bills, the Texans, the Chargers, and the Chiefs all hit 9 wins, yet they couldn't sniff the playoffs because the AFC North took both wildcard spots as the Cincinnati Bengals and the Baltimore Ravens finished 10-6. Given how hard it was to get a win in that conference that year, that must have sucked. Fighting to 9-7, usually a wildcard spot goes to a 9-7 team, yet that year, it just was not the case. And I understand there have been multiple 10-win teams that have missed out in the playoffs, and there even was an 11-win team that missed out in the playoffs, but that was before the division and the conference realignment that I was mentioning at 2002 that give us the conferences that we have today. Like, it was just weird back then. It was a lot more difficult, a lot more confusing, so I just left it all out and just stopped it at 2002. So since 2002, the 2014 AFC was the most competitive and the most difficult conference that I came across. Let's see how I project the 2021 AFC to match up against the 2014 AFC, and I think they match up pretty damn well. But let's take a look at the AFC today. The AFC East, it's not too competitive at the moment as we're only 4 weeks in. Remember, the Buffalo Bills are dominating it. I can see the Patriots eclipsing 8+ wins, maybe even 9 if they keep up the defensive play they had against the Buccaneers, but I don't think the Dolphins will be lucky to get to 8 wins, and I don't think the Jets are even coming close. Moving on to the AFC North, this division is super competitive as well as 3 teams sit at 3-1. I'm not sure if the Pittsburgh Steelers will be able to sniff 8 wins with their unhealthy defense and very piss poor offense, but the other 3 teams I could easily see hitting 9 wins right now. They're all looking good on offense. The Cincinnati Bengals defense is looking all right, but I mean the Browns and the Ravens, they're looking like contenders right now. Moving on to the AFC South, right now it doesn't look all that hot, but let me tell you this, once Tyrod Taylor returns, that Houston Texans team will once again return to semi-competitive. I'm not sure if they'll be able to hit 8 wins, but still, that Houston Texans team will be something to watch. The Indianapolis Colts right now also don't look too competitive, but they have the hardest schedule throughout the first 5 weeks, and they're also not healthy. I expect the Colts to make some noise throughout the midpoint and later on in the season. I fully expect them to hit 9 wins themselves. The Tennessee Titans, once they get healthy, I think they'll hit 9 wins, at least 8 wins probably, you would think, right? So that's 2 more teams from the AFC South. I'll leave out the Texans for now. We'll see how they fare when Tyrod comes back. But as of right now, we have 7 competitive teams in the AFC, in my personal opinion. Moving on to the AFC West, all 4 of these teams have a chance to do something and to make some noise later on in the season. Like, they're all playing really, really, really well, except for the Chiefs, but they're the Chiefs, and they'll bounce back. There are literally 3 teams at 3-1 in the AFC West, and the Chiefs are not one of them. That is absolutely nuts. The Raiders just got defeated by the Chargers last night. That was a very, very good game, but both of those teams fought very hard. Both of those teams are looking very, very good right now. The Chiefs are going to bounce back, as I mentioned. And the Broncos, although I think they're fraudulent at 3-1 at the moment after being defeated by the Baltimore Ravens this weekend, I think their defense is going to be good enough to carry them to 8 wins with a positive point differential. So that makes 4 out of 4 teams in the AFC West that could be competitive. So adding those 4 teams from the AFC West to the other 7 competitive teams from the 3 other divisions, that gives us 11 competitive teams in my personal opinion. We'll see how it all pans out. I think we're going to have something similar to 2014. It's going to be super tough to make the playoffs. And like I said, we could see some surprises like the Houston Texans maybe come close to 8 wins once Tyrod Taylor comes back, because their defense really isn't all that putrid, and Tyrod was putting on a show when he was there. So maybe once he gets healthy, the Texans will make some noise as well, and we could be seeing 12 competitive teams. I mean, this is going to be a really, really, really tight conference. It's going to come down to the wire. It just goes to show the talent level in this conference, and I think it deserved some acknowledgement, and I wanted to go back in history to see what kind of conferences were this competitive, because I feel like it hasn't been this good in a very long time. So to answer the question of the entire video, I'm going to say yes. We'll revisit it once the season is over to see how all the standings played out, see how the season played out, and I'm very, very excited to see how it all works. But it's a hot take, remember. I wanted to speak it into existence because I really, really wanted to acknowledge the talent level that we're seeing right now and how difficult it's going to be to make the playoffs, because it seems like every team has a chance. Any given Sunday has never applied to a season more than I feel like it does this one. Anyway, that's my completely pointless breakdown, but I thought it would be fun to talk about something that I feel like has never been talked about before. I really don't see people ever talking about how good a conference actually is. I feel like that's like not something people do, and I wanted to acknowledge it because I thought it was something cool. If you enjoyed the video, please leave any thoughts you have down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video, as always, please like, subscribe, do all the fun stuff. You want to hit the bell to be notified when I upload. I would appreciate that. You want to go over to Twitter, follow me over there. I would appreciate that as well. I'm a part of the Built-in Buffalo content creation team. If you enjoy Buffalo Bills content, be sure to follow and subscribe to us on any social medias that you might have, and I hope to see you in the next one. Peace.